Welcome everyone to Happier Homework Hours. We have Marydee Sklar with us today, and I'm super excited about this topic because homework in our house was always a complete nightmare. So I'm excited to learn a little bit more about making it, a little happier. And welcome Marydee, and thanks for coming and presenting for us.
Well, thank you for having me. So you ready for me to begin?
Yeah, go right ahead. Let's just jump right on in.
Okay. So happier homework hours. Before I actually do start, I want to let you know how much I appreciate organizations like Learning Ally, who support families who have struggling students. And I know I have my own website, and I appreciate the fact how expensive it is to run websites and to put on these kinds of programs for free for people. So I just want to put in a plug for them and suggest that if you find value in this program today, that you make a contribution to their program, because they do wonderful work helping many families. So let me give you a little bit about me for starters, okay? This is what I look like. Pretty much, I think I've changed my glasses since this picture, but that's pretty much me. I was a licensed teacher and reading specialist, so I worked with kids with learning issues, including dyslexia, for many years. I was in the classroom in a galaxy far, far away, but then spent about over 15 years, almost 15, 16, 17 years, with a private practice helping kids who had learning challenges. So I have a background in working with children who have some struggles. I've also been a volunteer. I ran a program at my local elementary school to teach volunteers to teach kids to read, specifically kids who are at risk for reading failure. And I also spent some time on the board of the Oregon branch of the International Dyslexia Association. So I have some background there also. I am a parent, and although my children now are really grown-ups, which is pretty exciting, they do get there, you guys, hang in there. And one of my children has aspects of dyslexia, and one of my children had pretty significant challenges with executive functions. That's all about getting things done, starting homework, thinking about the future, all that stuff. We're going to talk more about that in a few minutes. And I also have a brain that has its own challenges. So my brain has some areas in executive functioning that are quite weak, and we'll be talking about that in a little while, more about executive functioning. Because I learned about 22 years ago about my brain and the fact that my challenges with getting things done were not an issue of willpower, because I sort of described myself as an underachieving procrastinator for 40 years of my life. But when I learned about the brain and how it was connected to my behavior, I was able to do something about my challenges and change my behavior. So that led me to, about 7, 8 years ago, began a company called Executive Functioning Success, because I created a curriculum. Because for 15 years, I started doing research around my dining room table with families who were showing up needing help with getting homework done and turning in work, that kind of thing. And because I'd figured out how to support my own brain, I did research around the table for 15 years of figuring out how can I help these families understand what I understand about the brain and time. So I designed a program that's called Seeing My Time. And it's a workbook, and it has 6 units in it. It takes about, when I work with private families, about 9 hours usually to go through it. And there's also an instructor's manual, which was an award-winning book the year that it was produced, that supports that curriculum. I do online training for that program. It's being used around the world, actually, in schools and in therapeutic settings. And I also offer professional development courses for teachers. One I'm really quite excited about, and it's been very well received, is called Building Executive Function Skills in the Classroom. So you can check out my website for more information about those opportunities. But let's now go to our topic, which is happier homework hours, and how we're going to achieve that happier homework time is by focusing on the brain, because that's the thing that I've learned through all my years of working with families, is that when you have a child who's having trouble getting things done, they have a history of letting themselves down and letting the people around them down. So they have a lot of emotional defensiveness. You say to them, here, just use your planner, write in your planner, and they'll look at you and across their arms and they'll go, I already tried that, it didn't work. And they wrote in it, 2 days, and it didn't work. And they interpret it as something that they're a bad person. And so there's an emotional block. So what I've learned over the years is that you have to get past that emotional block, and you do that by depersonalizing the problem and making it a brain problem, not a personal problem. So that's sort of the basis of how Seeing My Time works. But we're going to talk here for a moment about the brain and homework, specifically about the executive functions of the brain. Now, executive functions is a whole other topic and a whole other presentation. But for right now, I want you to think a little bit about the brain. And what I want you to know is that the brain develops from the inside out and from the back to the front. So it's in the prefrontal cortex, this region of the brain behind your forehead, which is where your executive function processes in your brain are primarily located. And I'm going to show you what it takes to sit down and do homework. These are all the different executive function skills that are required. So one of them, just to get started, you have to be able to understand directions. And to do that, it requires something called metacognition, self-awareness, the ability to problem solve. That's a function of our brain. To start independently, this is a huge problem for parents. Because, I have to always nag them to get them to sit under their homework. Well, getting started independently is what's called task initiation. And that's very hard to do, and it takes a long time for that to mature, particularly in some of our challenged students. You have to be able to work despite distractions. This is where the whole ADHD crowd, these kids have a hard time. They have a brain that is underactivated, and it's easy for their brains to just shut down. They're working really, really hard to stay in this world, okay? And by the time they get home, particularly the ones who've been on medication, their medication is often run through their system, and they get home and they just can't muster their brain to stay focused. Asking for help. Now, when they're confused, and this is a biggie, and I really want you to understand this concept here. Kids don't have the metacognitive ability, that means that self-awareness, to understand that it's okay to ask for help, because we have a very, very self-reliant culture in the United States, and we don't like to ask for help. We're supposed to figure it out on our own. Well, I had a student years ago now who was I think he was a sophomore in high school, and his mom was a special ed teacher. And this kid was a character. He was a great kid, but he was a character. He was not producing much for school. He also had significant dyslexia, and probably a smattering of ADHD characteristics also, but dyslexia was a big issue for him. And we were working our way through the course, and we were learning about the brain, and we were getting into the strategies. And it was about session 5 maybe, where mom comes in, and she's just kind of sparkly. She's so excited, and she sits down, and at each one of my sessions, I always have people kind of check in. They'll say, what's working well? It's one of the questions I ask. And she sits down, and she can hardly contain herself while she's writing, and she puts her pencil down. She goes, Marydee, I just can't wait anymore. And she looked at her son, and she said, last night, you just sat down and started your homework. I didn't say a word to you. What strategies did you use? What was the metacognition? What was going on in your mind? How did last night you just sit down and start your homework? And he looked at her and he said this, I could. Did you get that, you guys? He could. That night's homework was something that He could either read the directions, he had prior knowledge to do it, he understood how to do it, he could do it independently. So a lot of parents miss this. They just think that they're being lazy, they're being resistant, they're being difficult. So a question to always ask your kids is, having trouble, looks like you're having trouble getting started. Is there something that you're confused about in the directions, or are you missing something that you don't understand? Because they will get hung up on the strangest things. I remember a kid who didn't turn in the assignment where the teacher sent home a big piece of paper, and they were to fold the paper into 8 boxes. And they had read this book in class that had 8 chapters, and they were supposed to draw a picture for each chapter in the book. Well, that sounds great, right? But what happened? Where did he get stuck? He couldn't fold a piece of paper into 8 even boxes. So he got mad, he got frustrated, he threw the paper away, and in his brain, he couldn't do the assignment because he didn't have that piece of paper. So always check in and see what it is that they're confused about. And then the ability to stick with it, to finish it. That's what's called goal-directed persistence. Checking your work to see if you've made any errors or mistakes. That's a very mature part of your brain working there. It's part of metacognition. And then the other one is to finish on time, okay? That takes time management abilities, to work when you need to be working instead of playing when you should be working. And the final one is to remember to turn it in. I mean, I bet you a lot of you have kids who've had their homework done, and it's in their backpack and their binder, but they don't turn it in, and they get marked down because they didn't turn it in on time. Well, that's actually the guilty party there is the working memory capacity of their brain. They can't remember in class. There's too much going on, and they miss the cue, or they get distracted, and they can't hold in their mind their need to turn in their work. So if there's teachers listening, what happens is teachers often want to serve out consequences. I will teach them through consequences to turn it in. Well, if you have poor working memory, consequences don't help at all, because you just can't store that thought in your head. It's really, really hard. So marking kids down who have working memory challenges is, not fair. And it's also what happens is it starts creating a negative response because they give up. Like, why bother? I just get marked down. I did all that work last night, and I got, instead of getting an A, I'm going to get a B. Why do I bother? Or a B or a C. So be very careful about marking kids down for turning something in late. Just make sure that teachers, you're giving lots of cues, visual and auditory, to help that child turn in their work. And I'm going to show you a binder organization strategy which will increase the odds of that work getting turned in. So those are the executive functions. So you can see it takes a lot of executive functions in order to sit down and do your homework. And if they don't have those executive functions developed in their brain, then they're going to need your support to get them started. And here's the hard truth. That prefrontal cortex does not fully develop until the ages of 25 to 30 plus. It's a long time, you guys. My son's executive systems came on somewhere around 26 and a half. When he reached that point, I thought, oh my gosh, he's finally got it. He's got an adult brain. I didn't think I was going to live that long, but it came on. But you have to support a brain that is immature and young in their executive functions. And so my key idea for this slide is to remember, if they're not starting their work, there may simply be confusion at the root. So today we're going to talk, I said earlier, we'll talk about time, because that's what we want to do, and how time gets in the way. We have to understand time. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about the brain and motivation, and how we can motivate, help kids learn to motivate themselves to get homework done. And then we'll talk a bit about paper management, managing those black holes of the universe, the backpack and the binder. So the trouble with time is time itself. It is an abstract concept. You tell a kid, hurry up, we've got 5 minutes. Well, what's 5 minutes? You can't see 5 minutes in your head. You can't. It's an abstract concept. So if we can't see it, we're going to have to make time concrete and visible. We have to make it external, because a brain that has executive function challenges of time awareness and time management, it doesn't have an internal awareness of the passing of time. So we have to support it externally. So to do that, we're going to create some visual representations for time to help kids think about time differently. We're going to think about it spatially. So I use little what I call time circles. And I use a little circle, and that circle represents the face of an analog clock, the old-fashioned face clock with the 1, 2, 3 through 12 on it. That represents a clock. And if something's going to take an hour to complete, I fill in the whole circle. If something's going to take 30 minutes, I fill in half of the circle. 15 minutes is a quarter of the circle. And 5 is just a little sliver. So I'm going to show you how we're going to use these time circles to help your student understand time better. So one of the things I do with my clients and my families is early on I tell them that they need to become a time scientist, to not guess about how long things are going to take. They need to collect data. So because kids think that homework is going to take up all the evening, particularly when it's something they don't want to do. I mean, so often parents are like, and if you just sit down and do it, it only takes you 10 minutes. But in their mind, it's this big, ugly monster that's going to stretch and take up all of their time. So they start digging their heels in and procrastinate because they don't want to use all their time for homework, and I don't blame them. They've been at work all day, and they don't want to continue to work after they get home. But you need to help them understand that, you know, it's not as bad as they think it is, but they have to collect data. So what I have people do is I have them record how long it takes to do things. And for students, I have them, this is a great time at the beginning of the school year, to time how long it actually takes to do each subject's homework. Because if you ask a kid, well, how long does it take to do math? They'll say this, well, it depends. Sometimes it's not very much, and sometimes it's a lot. And that's the truth. But then what happens is their brain focuses on one or the other extreme. Math takes forever, so they drag their feet. So we want to collect data for 5 sittings, okay? And so you're going to do these little time circles. Your kids can make an estimate. Very important they make a guess, okay? I guess it's going to take me a half an hour. And then they record how long it really took. So in our example, we can see that math actually took less time. English turned out to take more time. And guess what? Emptying the dishwasher, that task that nobody wants to do, really doesn't take very long. So have your kids time how long it takes to do things, how long to get dressed in the morning, get ready for school, how long does it take to pack your lunches. All these tasks they need to collect data for, to record it. And with the homework one, as I said earlier, collect 5 days worth of work and then divide the total amount of time by 5, and that will give you your average amount of time for that subject's homework. So you can, I have this form is available if you go to blamethebrain.com. It signs you up for my newsletter, and there's a piece, another article that you can download that gives more information about executive functions. So now let's go to the brain and talk about how do we motivate the brain to do things, because motivation turns out to be the result of chemical processes in our brain. And not everybody has the same chemistry going on up there in their brains. So what we want to activate specifically is dopamine. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter hormone, the chemical that they just feel good. And it's tied directly to motivation, to sustaining motivation. And we have dopamine in our brain, throughout our brain, and different kinds of things will activate it. Music will activate it. Movement activates it. Storytelling activates it. all those things are important. So one thing you can do with kids who are tired or working on homework is to give them an intermission period of a little break and just do jumping jacks. When I used to teach reading little kids, we would work for half an hour, and then we'd go in the living room, and I'd say, okay, give me 10. You know, we would jump up and down, and we'd do some kind of exercise, and then the kids would reactivate their brain's energy, and then they would be able to sit back down and focus again. So, but we're going to talk specifically about a part of our brain that's on the slide here, this little red dot there. It's a little larger than it is in reality, but it's called the nucleus accumbens, and it's full of dopamine. And that dopamine only goes to our prefrontal cortex. And it is magical when you understand the dopamine reward system. And video game manufacturers understand this about our brain. I bet you a lot of you have ADHD kids, and you know those kids can like focus on a video game for hours, and you give them 3 math problems. Suddenly the spider on the wall is more interesting. Well, you want to understand the brain just like the video game people do, okay? Because this dopamine reward system is in all mammals. It's part of our survival. So how video games work is, number one, is you make a prediction. As you're playing one of those kind of games, you're making a prediction. There, it's going to be there, oh, here, there, oh, there. Okay. You're constantly making predictions. And then the second component to activating that dopamine is that you have to make, it has to be an achievable chunk. Your prediction is that you're going to be able to do this because it's small enough that I can do it, all right? So in a video game, that equates to levels. You get to different levels, or sometimes some of the games have a time frame. You have to get done in a certain amount of time. And so your brain is happy when it's a small enough chunk that you can finish it. You don't give up. And then the final thing that video game makers understand is that you have to have visible proof that you are meeting your predictions, that you're meeting your levels, that you're progressing. And so visible proof is, you know, all the little rewards that you get, the gems, the money, the trophies, or whatever it is that you collect in that particular game. So whenever you fulfill those 3 requirements, into your brain pops dopamine, bing. So I use it all the time to motivate myself, and I'm going to show you how here in just a minute. But for those teachers out there who want to know more about dopamine reward system and how to motivate students, I recommend the work of Dr. Judy Willis. She is a neurologist who, after 15 years, left medicine to become a school teacher. And so she's all about the brain and learning. So I recommend her website. Just type in Judy Willis, MD, and Ignite Student Learning. It's her books. She has several books. So we're going to activate the dopamine reward system by making a homework plan. So it looks like a to-do list, but it's different than a to-do list. So I have students come home, and we make a little list. And I actually I time this for the first time I have the kids do this. Let's see, what do you have to do after school today? So I first have them write down their subjects. And then I have them write down chores, responsibilities that they have. Did you know there was a study done that kids who had chores, who did them independently, are more successful in life than kids who don't have chores? So I have them put down a chore. And then I have them put down the reward. When they are done with all their work, what are they going to get to do? So first they make the list, and then, and this is the key part, then they're going to put a time circle. That is their estimate. And it's an achievable chunk. It's something that's not so big that they don't think they can do it. So math, 30 minutes, they figure they can do. Now, looking at language arts next, this child figured that language arts was going to take 45 minutes. Well, 45 minutes is a long time. My brain starts getting resistant when I have to think about doing something for 45 minutes or an hour. I don't want to do that. So I break the task into smaller pieces. I do a half hour, and then when I'm done with that, I get to cross it off, and I'm going to get some dopamine, and then I'll do my next 15 minutes. So here's how it works. When they get done with their math, they cross it off. And as soon as you cross it off, into your brain you get a dopamine hit. And that helps motivate you to start the language arts component. And as I said earlier, we want to just do a half hour at a time because that 45 minutes is too much. As soon as I cross that off, I get dopamine, okay? And then when I'm all the way done, I get to cross that one off, and then I get to cross that off, and my brain is feeling very good. So you go through this list, crossing off your estimates and your tasks, and your brain actually feels good. I will ask you guys a question. Have any of you ever, done a task that wasn't on your list, and then you turn over and you write that task onto the list so you could cross it off, and then cross it off? I bet you some of you have done that. When I ask this to large groups, usually a third of the people in the room will raise their hand and say, yeah, I've done that. Well, the reason they're doing it is that when they cross it off, they get dopamine into their brain, and it feels good, and it motivates them to keep going. So it's very, very important to teach your kids to make a plan. This is also activating future thinking, which is an executive functioning skill, a planning process, and help your kids understand that crossing off a list makes your brain feel good. Now, you want homework to go a little faster and a little easier. What we want to do here is kids want to procrastinate all the time. Oh, it's not due till next week, or it's not due tomorrow. Okay, particularly the kids who are on block schedules. One day they have history and they don't have history until 2 days later. Tuesday they have history and Thursday they have history. So in their brain, they think, oh, that's not due tomorrow, so I've got the time. Well, because they don't have future awareness, they don't realize that tomorrow is going to have other things that are happening too, and maybe even more complicated homework, and that they won't have the space to do this other assignment that's due on Thursday, and then they'll end up staying up too late. So the way to get around homework that is due tomorrow, it's not due tomorrow, is to teach your kids to do homework on the day that it is assigned. And the reason we want to do that is because we forget about 70% of what we were just told. Have that big of a working memory capacity. And in fact, with this lecture I'm giving you, you'll remember maybe 30% of what you hear by the time you're done. We just can't hold on to all that information. So your students, when they get home after a long day, they're only going to remember 30% of what that teacher said about their assignment that they needed to work on. So if they start their homework that day, though, they at least have something in their brain to grab onto to do the work. If they wait until tomorrow to do it, there's nothing there for them to grab onto. Those memories may just dissipate because they haven't activated those neurons. Your brain doesn't hold on to things unless it thinks it's particularly valuable, all right? And if we haven't reactivated what the teacher was saying, then our brain says, yeah, we'll use these neurons for something else. We'll forget it. So the next day, they really can't do their homework because they don't remember anything that the teacher said about it. So you want to make sure that they are starting their homework on the day that it is assigned. And here at the beginning of the school year is a good time to try to get them into that habit. Even if they don't finish it today, they will have reactivated those memories, and they'll be stronger the next day for them to do their homework to finish it. So the beginning of the year is a good time because once you get behind with the A-Day, B-Day stuff, that's that cascade effect that in 6 to 8 weeks they're behind because they're missing assignments. So I'm going to pause here for just a minute, and I want you to write down your key idea. We've talked about lots of things. We talked about executive functions, how complicated it is to sit down and do homework. We talked about making plans. We talked about dopamine reward systems. We talked about time circles. Write down what being a time scientist, write down what your key idea is. Okay, let's go on now to those papers, because we have to teach people how to think about organization, particularly a brain with executive functioning challenges. This is a challenge that doesn't hit everybody's brains. I know I had kids who had pretty significant dyslexia issues who didn't have any trouble with organizing stuff, but it's a problem for many, many people. But we can teach them how to think about pieces of paper in their lives. So the key idea about paper is to help people understand that every piece of paper needs a home. And by home, I mean one place where it belongs, where it lives. And a pile is not a home. Okay, a lot of people use pile strategies. Well, it's in that pile somewhere. That's not a home. We need to be able to find it very quickly and know exactly where it lives. So instead of having piles, we want to have our papers organized like in a filing cabinet that is, we know exactly where to look for that piece of paper. And binders, school binders, you have to help kids understand it is a filing cabinet, not a pile. And this is what happens with kids. They don't know what to do with their papers, so they just stuff them inside of their binders. And you all know that whole thing. Well, it's in there somewhere, maybe. I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't throw this away. What do I do with this? And they can't find anything. That's what happens often when they've done some homework, but they can't find it to turn it in. And they get frustrated and they give up. So I'm going to give you an example or how I teach an effective binder system. And this is often one of the favorite tools for kids who take the my Seeing My Time course, because they know where things are, and it's a real de-stressor. They feel confident because they know where to find those pieces of paper. So here's how I put together a binder. I start with a binder that is soft, a lightweight one. I'm not a fan of those binders that are big, huge, 3-inch thick things that have zippers and bells and whistles and all that stuff. Those things are marketed primarily for middle school kids. You get those binders because you grow up. Of course, they break by December, and kids don't want to go to the effort of unzipping them in order to, write in their planners or whatever. So I like the Mead, M-E-A-D, 5-star plastic binders, and I like them because they are lightweight. And they're quite sturdy, and you can get them like the example on the picture where they have a window and a cover, and that way the kids can customize their binder and makes it more personal, and they'll use things that they feel they're proud of. I had one of my students show up just yesterday with his favorite basketball team was on the cover of his binder. And I like the Mead Star binder because it is wider than many of the plastic binders on the market, and by being wider, its edges cover the tabs on their dividers. They don't get beat up. And then the second component is what I call the in and out folder. It's a clear folder, one that I can see through, and it's used to take papers to and from school. And we'll talk a bit more about how this is used. But that should be the first thing when they open the binder. They see this clear plastic folder. Then they should also have a 2-page monthly calendar. And I recommend this to be what kids use as their planner, their agenda, where they write down their assignments. A 2-page spread has adequate room for almost everybody to write in. Even I've had kids who were pretty significantly dysgraphic, able to get their homework assignments into the space for the day. I taught them how to do shorthand. So, M was for math, P is for page, so that they didn't feel like they had to write out everything in a big, long way that would take up the space. And I like the 2-page view because it gives the kids a picture of the future. What's due beyond this week, because most planners that kids are given at schools, they only go a week out. And that the kids turn the page and go, oh, that project is due on Wednesday. I forgot about it, because they couldn't see it. So when you have it on the monthly calendar, that works. Then I also want them to use plastic pockets dividers, one for each subject. And because by using the pocket dividers, front and back pockets, the kids don't have to open and close their binders very much, and the pockets are only for things that they're being worked on in class. Things that are incomplete that they're working on in class goes in the pockets. And then I recommend quick load sheet protectors, specifically the Avery product, quick load sheet protectors. They're not open, and most sheet protectors are closed on 3 sides, and they're a royal pain to try to slip a piece of paper into, and kids just won't do that. Too much work. I won't do it. Too much work. But the quick load is sealed on 2 sides, and you just fold back one flap and slip a piece of paper in there, just goes right in. And those are used for those pieces of paper that the kids need to store for later use. So for instance, class syllabuses. So if you have a syllabus for English, you would put it in the quick load sheet protector, and you would put it behind the pocket divider. Things like project descriptions, rubrics, vocabulary words you're going to study over a period of time, those kinds of things would go into those quick load sheet protectors so they have a home. And so what I do, this is a page from Seeing My Time, I teach the kids to think about their papers. And first I start off with, where do you not want to put those papers that the teachers give you? Because teachers often sort of hand the kids the papers right at the end of class, and the kids don't have time to put them away in their homes, so they stuff them. So I have them make a list of where don't you want to put them, where they're going to go out of sight and out of mind without having a home. Backpacks, binders, inside of books, inside of pockets, inside of lockers. Those are all places that are dangerous. They're going to go out of sight and out of mind if we're going to forget them. So where we want them to go is inside of that clear in and out folder. So during the day, everything just gets stuffed inside of that folder. If you want to be fancy, you put it on the left-hand side, but you just stuff it into that folder. That's temporary home during school. And then you have to teach them how to think about those papers. So when they get home, they have to empty that in and out folder completely. All right? Everything comes out, otherwise it becomes a pile. And everything in that pile fits into the first 4 categories on this page. It's something that needs to be recycled. I'm not going to need this anymore. If it has a grade on it, you don't recycle it. But if you don't need it again and it doesn't have a grade on it, recycle it. Some of them are papers that parents need to see. So parents, do you have a home for your kids to put papers that you need to see? Something you need to sign, something about a school event. You need to have a home for them to put that in so that you can see it and deal with it. Also, sometimes those pieces of paper, they have a date on them, and those dates need to go onto calendars. Then the remaining papers, some of them are going to have to be filed. So you're going to file anything that is graded, and you want that at home, not inside your binder. You probably will never use these pieces of paper ever again, but it's easy for teachers to make mistakes. They have hundreds of papers. It's really easy to put, your kid's grade in the next kid's line. Okay, it just happens accidentally. But if the teacher doesn't know that they did that over time, and so your child is told, you never turned it in. Your kid, yes, I did, but if you don't have that graded paper, you have no proof. So just store them until the grades come in. When the grades come in, recycle them. And then the other pieces of paper you're going to file into the binder by subject in the pockets or sheet protectors. Those are things that you need to use in class later. And that leaves us with the do it now, the homework. So we work on our homework. We make that list I showed you earlier, figure out estimates how long it's going to take, and we do it. And then we put it, to get back to school, we put it in the in and out folder. Now, I'm not fussy about how it comes into the folder, but I'm fussy about how it goes out. So on the left-hand side, you're going to take your math paper. Let's say math is first period. We're going to open up that folder, and we're going to put it in the left-hand pocket face down. And let's say that English is second. We're going to put it in the left-hand pocket on top of the math paper face down. Why we're doing that is that when you open your binder the next day, what's going to be staring you in your face is the math paper that you need to turn in. And when you take that out, you're going to then see the English paper that needs to be turned in. This folder is one of the kids' favorite tools. So this is how we can organize a binder. Okay, let's see. There we go. Next, we've got, things clicking slowly here. Okay. It takes time to teach this, you guys. And I do this, I taught my 5th grade son, who was Mr. Space Cadet, how to do this. It takes about 2 weeks to help them understand what to do with pieces of paper. And if you have a child who just can't throw something away, put it in a box or have them make a note to ask their teacher whether they need to keep it. So what is your key idea? I'm going to pause here. We're just about done. I will have some questions, but I want you to pause and write down your key idea about organizing binders and papers. Okay? I want you to remember that you can't do what you haven't been taught. So sometimes kids look like they're not doing their homework. It's because there's confusion. And so you need to help them get past the confusion. And the other thing you need to know about kids who are not doing homework, giving you lots of battles, is that they may have an executive skill that needs support. And one of them is simply getting started. Remember, that's a task initiation. It's hard. So I recommend to parents, come up, they'll say to their kids, looks like you're having a hard time getting started. Tell you what, I don't want to pay bills tonight. How about if we set a timer and we meet at the table, dining room table, in 5 minutes. You can start your homework on your end. I'll start my bills on my end, and we'll work for 30 minutes. How's that sound? That's a parent supporting that executive skill of getting started. Because support is key to developing executive functioning skills. Remember, it's 25 to 30 plus to have a mature executive system. And just like you taught your child to ride a bicycle, you didn't, when they finally got the balance down, you didn't just walk in the door and walk in the house and close the door. You were out there going, look out for cars, stop at the stop sign, get up on the sidewalk. You were being their executive functioning system. You were loaning them, your brain. So you need to be monitoring your kids' behavior as they go through school. Now it becomes more of a coaching role, because if you do it all for them, they will never develop those executive function skills. So you have to be more of a coach and help them understand, okay, that didn't work so well. What did we learn from it? What tool can we use next time to not get the bad results that we didn't enjoy experiencing? So little by little, it is a process, because happier homework hours lead to happier students. So if you want to learn more, that's my website, and I have a newsletter that people really enjoy reading.
We lost your sound, Marydee.
Okay, sorry. Yes, thank you. My sound has appeared on me. If you want to learn more, I apologize for that. If you want to learn more, you can check out my website. And the newsletter you can sign up for on blamethebrain.com. And I have a book that I wrote called 50 Tips to Help Students Succeed. It's available on Amazon. And it's just full of things I always wanted parents to know, and that helps a lot. And it's been very well received in the world. So I've just given you some of the things that I talk about in the book, and there are actually some of the things I didn't talk about or are not actually in that book. But there's a lot of good ideas for parents. Okay, so I am done now. And Jennifer, do you have questions for me?
Yeah, I actually do have a few questions for you. So let's go ahead and just jump straight into the questions. One question we have is, do you think it's a good idea to do homework at school? And, is that an effective thing to do, or should they be doing that at home?
Well, it depends upon the school setting. And because, again, if it's a homework class or club kind of thing after school, and it's supervised and it's being run where the child feels comfortable asking for help, okay, and teachers are monitoring them to see that they actually do get their work done, then it can be great. The downside is that eventually they're going to have to figure out how to do it on their own. Okay, so if it's available to you and it's making your life easy, go for it. But eventually, you need to teach them this whole concept of doing things they don't want to do, and how to make lists and make plans and work on things little by little. So I'm not against it, but it isn't always the joy that parents think it's going to be, because not all programs are as supportive as they should be.
Right. Very true. We had that experience in our home. With my daughter, it worked great. With my son, it was a time to socialize and clown around at school for another hour. So it didn't work. He still came home with his homework.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, any suggestions to help a student buy into the way of managing paper and doing homework? My daughter was taught Seeing My Time last year in elementary school and has had great success. Her brother, that is in middle school with executive functioning skill issues, would benefit from this way of organizing papers and doing homework, but he resists and says, I have my own way of organizing. However, it's not working for him.
It's not. Right. Well, you're dealing with. I'm betting he's like an 8th grader.
Yeah. Middle school. Yeah.
It's 8th graders are a challenge. Many years ago, I heard Mel Levine, who was a behavioral pediatrician, and he did a lot of work with the brain. And he had this great line. He had a whole clinic where he did testing for kids. And he said, 8th graders are the toughest. He goes, I wish we could put a sign outside of our office that says testing, support, K through 7, 9 through 12, 8th graders, please go to Vanderbilt. Because they can be hard, and it's partly because they're growing into their independence, and adults have much less interest to them. They're more interested in their peers. So her challenge is, her sister got it at the right age. 8th graders, what you have to do is model. And then you also have to let him have some of those consequences. Okay, so he's saying it's working well. And he may have to do some struggling. And this is where the coaching comes in as a parent, is saying, you know what, you didn't do so well. These grades aren't so hot, or you got marked down because you didn't turn that in. Do you want to sit down and talk about how you might figure out how to make that work better? There's this, and he has to come to the table somehow, and then be very gentle. That's how your sister always says it. It's like, well, this is one thing that you could try, and just give them a little bit at a time. But a lot of it's modeling, and they sometimes have to do some slipping and some bumping and some crashing before they're interested in getting more help. And if you can't do it yourself to get them activated, then look for someone who might have had some training in Seeing My Time. Sounds like, well, I'm not sure which elementary school she's talking about, but look for someone who can help him go through this program, because they'll buy in better from somebody else than the parent when they hit that 8th grade, 9th grade age.
Right, absolutely. Very true. Okay, so the next question I have, and you actually did a really good job at covering it, it was, how do I get my child to get started when they're just not getting started? And you did a phenomenal job of covering that, and that it was an issue in my home also, is just trying to get them started. And I just really appreciate all the tips you gave. And even for like my son, I finally did figure it out. And of course, I didn't do a good job following through myself, because I have my own issues that are very similar to his. But if I would just sit down and go over what do you got to do, and really help him kind of have a plan and just sit there, he would get going on it. But I think one thing that we have to acknowledge here is that these kids that have these issues have parents that have these issues. So I wouldn't follow through on my part either, till it was like 9 o'clock at night or something. So having a plan for the parents and the kid, this is like a family thing. It's not just the kid's issue usually. I mean, I think it's very rare that it just be the kid's problem, There's usually a parent that's got some of these things.
Absolutely. When I teach Seeing My Time, I only work with families. I don't work with kids by themselves. At
Yeah.
least one parent has to come because we need common vocabulary and we need common strategies. And you're right. Usually the apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I saw a lot of really good tips I wish I would have had, boy, when my kids were doing all this stuff. So, okay, we have another question about music. Um,
Ah,
we have, is it good to listen to music? You know, kids always want to listen to music while they're doing their homework, and some parents feel it's very distracting. What's your opinion on music?
okay. Well, there's some science out there that indicates that the ADHD brain does well with certain kinds of music, almost creating a white noise and or creating a beat that kind of pumps up their brain. The key thing about music, though, is that there should be no lyrics because our brains are wired for language, and it will trump our attention. We'll start thinking about the lyrics in the song, and it will be distracting. So I'm not against music so long as there isn't lyrics involved. Now, that said, most brains do better in silence. I learned this, I did an experiment on myself. It actually takes brain energy to focus. I understood that. And then I read a book by Dr. Sandra Chapman called Make Your Brain Smarter. And she talked about the fact that it actually takes brain energy for our brain to screen out sensory information. So all the noises in the room, including music, in order for us to focus, our brain has to use energy to not pay attention. So when I was writing my 50 Tips book, I used to, when I started it, I would listen to Pandora and I would put on like a Mozart station or something and work. But when I read this bit about how my brain was taking energy to screen out the music, I decided to work in silence. And the first day I went crazy because it was too quiet. But what I noticed by the end of the week was that I had gotten more done than I thought I was going to, and I wasn't as tired at the end of the day. And so now I never work with music on, unless I'm cleaning house or something like that. You know, I need to pump up my brain. I'll use that kind of music. But when I need to think, I do it in silence because my brain actually needs quiet.
I think that you brought up a good point, though. We have to, like, kind of learn how to do that, and especially people that do have, you know, issues with wanting that stimulation. And it seems like it's helpful because, you know, like you were talking about in the presentation, the dopamine is released when, you know, we're doing the part that we want, and it makes it seem better. But overall, the outcome might not be better. But it is uncomfortable, I think. You do have to learn how to kind of through it a little.
Yeah, and like I said, if I had more of an ADHD brain that was underactivated, I might very well use one of the music kind of programs that they've designed out there for ADHD brains and try it. It wouldn't. I don't think it would. I haven't tried it myself because that's not my issue. But you know, I think that particularly if you've got somebody who is kind of overly sensitive to all kinds of things, you know, those kids who are hypersensitive to any noises, maybe having some kind of positive beat going on will at least create a white noise in their brain.
Right. Okay, that's a great answer. Okay, so one more question here is, should we start homework right away when we get home from school, or allow downtime and, you know, some time to play or whatever? What's your opinion on when homework should be done?
Yes. Okay, well, you have to realize they've just come home from work. And so kind of imagine your own brain coming home from work. Do you want to sit back down and go back to work? Probably not. So the brain needs a bit of a break. And so it's good to let them have a bit of downtime, but an interesting kind of downtime. Computers and video games are really not downtime for the brain, okay? So I would suggest making sure that they eat something proteinaceous, something like nuts or for the brain. Nothing, not really sugary, but something that's got some protein involved. And but not maybe a lot. Maybe let them go out and shoot baskets or something, or if it's an inside thing, let them play a Wii exercise game, one of those things. Get their body moving. Let them just kind of, take the dog for the walk. And, depend upon your child, a 30-minute break or so just to kind of wind down and get some food into their system and get them going. And so I would recommend doing that. But the reason you want to show them what's going to go on if they wait longer. And I don't have access in this program to be able to show you visually what I'm talking about, so I'm going to try to explain it so you can see it. You want to use those time circles. Remember the time circle I talked about? So you say, okay, if you come home and you don't work for an hour, okay, and I put down break. I write the word break, and I'll do an hour circle. And then you're going to sit down and start your homework, and you work for 30 minutes, okay? And then you want to take another break. This is the problem with breaks. They go, oh, I want another break. So they take another half-hour break, all right? And then they sit down. So we do a time circle there. So now we have an hour. We have about 2 hours, okay? And we've only done 1 half-hour of homework in 2 hours. And then we do another half hour of homework. And so we've got 2.5 hours worth of work to finish an hour's worth of homework. Mm-hmm. So if you show them those time circles and say, do you want to, and then you go, if we didn't take a long break, let us say that we took a half-hour break, a real break at the beginning, but instead of a break between subjects, we do what one of my brilliant middle high school kids taught me last spring. You take an intermission. And by an intermission, what do you do in an intermission? When you go to a play, you get up, you stretch, go to the bathroom, you get a drink, and you sit back down. Maybe you get a little snack. It's not very long. Okay, it's not a half-hour break. It's like a really short break. So teach your kids to have an intermission. So you have a half-hour break, a half-hour circle, a 5-minute little circle of intermission, and a half-hour of finishing their next assignment. So at that point, we've now done homework for how long? 1.5 hours, in a few minutes for the intermission break. So if you show them concretely the difference, the kids are looking at it going, huh. Because if you work the shorter one, you get your homework done earlier, faster, and then you have more time to play. Because that's what they're really worried about, is not having any time to play.
Well, and I think you hit on something big too. Like when you have it in that time span of like 2.5 hours, that's 2.5 hours of your time, and you only did the homework for actually a half hour in between or whatever. I think overall it doesn't feel like that though. It feels like I've been doing homework since I got home.
Exactly.
So then
in
it's
their
like
brain.
this 2-hour thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Very cool. You know what? This is really good information, and I'm definitely going to look into it more. I think it's really cool. I think that the time data thing was something that really kind of hit home for me, is just not having good data to understand exactly how long it takes for something, and how important it is to develop that, and how we do have to teach our kids to be aware of that. That was a big part for me that I took away from this. It's very good. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. We're going to go ahead and wrap up. That's all the questions we had. I just want to let everybody know about the Spotlight on Dyslexia conference that we're having this year. It's on Friday, December 2nd, and it's going to start at 9 a.m. Eastern. It will be available on demand, so you'll be able to watch it afterwards. This is a little bit different experience than a webinar. It is actually a conference, so while you're there, you can talk with other people, network with other people, go into the chat rooms, and go into the exhibit hall, and it's really kind of a neat experience. It is definitely a virtual conference. So I'm hoping everybody will check that out, and I think registration just opened today. So check it out, get the early bird pricing. And Marydee, I want to thank you again for doing this webinar for us. It was very valuable information, and I appreciate your time and effort on this.
Well, Jennifer, it's my honor to do this. I appreciate you being asked, and I just want the parents to take a deep breath and be calm, and little by little you can help your students develop those executive functioning skills of their brain so that homework will be happier. So thank you.
Thank you, Marydee. All right, have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.